The door closes behind her with a sound like a tomb sealing shut. Sister Anna doesn't turn around. She knows if she looks back at the faces of the other women crowded into this stone chamber, their eyes wide with the terrible understanding of what comes next, she will break. So she keeps her gaze forward, locked on the window carved high in the wall, a rectangle of sky so blue it seems impossible that anything cruel could exist beneath it. Her hands are trembling, not from fear, but from something else, something older than fear. The knowledge that what she does in the next 60 seconds will echo across centuries she will never see. The Ottoman governor stands in the corner, arms crossed, watching her with the patience of a man who has broken stronger wills than hers. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The choice has already been explained in words that tasted like ash. Convert, or watch every woman in this room disappear into the empire's machinery of erasure, sold, scattered, silenced forever. Before we go deeper into what happened in that room, I'm genuinely curious. Where are you watching this from? It amazes me that a story from 5 centuries ago can reach you, wherever you are in the world right now. What you're about to hear isn't the sanitized version they taught in textbooks. This is the story they buried in Ottoman archives, in desperate letters from missionaries, in the traumatized testimonies of survivors who somehow found their way back to tell what they witnessed. This is about what happened when an empire decided that the most effective way to conquer wasn't through the sword. It was through something far more calculated, far more permanent. Let's go back to where this began, because Sister Anna wasn't always standing in that room making an impossible choice. 18 months earlier, the convent of Holy Trinity sat like a crown jewel in the hills above Adrianople. It wasn't grand, just a cluster of stone buildings around a chapel whose bells had rung every morning since 1398. 43 women lived there, most of them Greek, some Bulgarian, all of them bound by vows that meant more than the stone walls protecting them. They grew herbs in gardens that smelled like rosemary and thyme. They copied manuscripts by candlelight, their fingers cramping as they preserved texts that were already ancient when their grandmothers were young. They sang vespers in harmonies that made travelers on the road below stop and listen, wondering if they'd stumbled near something holy. Sister Anna had been there since she was 14. That was 22 years ago, before the Ottoman noose tightened around what remained of Byzantine territory. Before Sultan Mehmed II, the same man who broke Constantinople in 1453, turned his attention to the scattered fragments of Christian resistance still glowing like embers across his expanding empire. The convent should have been insignificant. 43 women with no army, no political power, no leverage beyond their prayers. But Mehmed understood something that most conquerors miss. Symbols matter more than soldiers. Every church bell still ringing was a declaration that the old world refused to die. Every nun still praying in Greek was proof that conquest isn't complete until you erase not just the people, but the memory of who they were. In April 1471, a letter arrived at the convent. Not a threat, an invitation. The Sultan, in his infinite mercy, wished to extend protection to all faithful subjects of the empire. A census would be conducted. Records would be updated. New arrangements would be made for the convent's continued operation under Ottoman supervision. The abbess, a woman named Theodora, who had survived 3 wars and 2 plagues, read that letter 3 times. Then she gathered the sisters in the chapel and told them to prepare their souls, because she recognized the language of erasure dressed up as bureaucracy. When the Ottoman officials arrived 2 weeks later, they brought scribes, not soldiers. They counted heads, recorded names, cataloged the convent's meager possessions with the efficiency of men who had done this 100 times before. The lead official, a man named Mahmud Pasha, whose signature appears on dozens of similar documents across Ottoman archives, was almost apologetic in his precision. "This is merely administrative," he assured Theodora through a translator. "The Sultan wishes only to know who resides within his territories." But Theodora had lived long enough to recognize a census for what it really was. A list of who could be taken, when, and how. The real blow came 3 months later. Another letter, colder this time. The convent's legal status under Byzantine law was void. Under Ottoman law, Christian religious communities could continue operating only under specific conditions: payment of the jizya tax, registration of all members, and acknowledgement of the Sultan's supreme authority over religious affairs. The tax was calculated not to sustain the convent, but to bleed it. The registration requirement meant every woman's name would be in imperial ledgers, tracked, monitored, controlled. And the acknowledgement. That was the knife hidden in silk. Accept the Sultan's authority over your faith, or lose the protection of law entirely. Theodora called another meeting. The youngest sister was 16. The oldest was 74. None of them had ever imagined they would have to choose between their vows and their lives. "We cannot pay," Theodora said quietly. "We barely sustain ourselves as it is. And if we accept their terms, we are no longer a convent. We are a building they permit to exist until it's no longer convenient." Sister Anna, already known among the women for her steady nerve and sharper mind, asked the question everyone was thinking. "And if we refuse?" Theodora's silence was the answer. What happened next unfolded with the terrible inevitability of a trap that had been set long before anyone saw the steel jaws. The convent sent a carefully worded reply. They would pray for the Sultan's health and prosperity, but they could not in good conscience acknowledge temporal authority over sacred matters. It was phrased as respectfully as desperation allows, but the Ottomans didn't care about phrasing. 6 weeks later, the soldiers arrived. Not a battalion, just 20 men, enough to surround a building full of women who had no weapons and no escape. They didn't burn the gates down. They knocked politely and waited for someone to open the door. Sister Anna was the one who drew back the bolt. The officer in charge was younger than she expected, barely 30, with the kind of face that probably looked gentle when he wasn't doing this. He spoke in Turkish first, then switched to broken Greek when he saw her incomprehension. "You have 3 days to reconsider. After that, the convent will be seized as abandoned property. You will be escorted to Constantinople for reassignment." That word, reassignment. It hung in the air like smoke from a pyre. Theodora demanded to know what it meant. The officer's expression flickered between pity and impatience. "The Sultan's household requires domestic staff. You will be given new opportunities to serve the empire in practical ways." Domestic staff. The euphemism was so thin it was almost insulting. But the truth beneath it was spelled out in documents that scholars would find centuries later in the Topkapi Palace archives. A systematic program of converting or dispersing Christian religious communities, scattering them so thoroughly that they could never reform, never resist, never become symbols of the world that existed before Ottoman rule. For 3 days, the sisters prayed, wept, and argued. Some wanted to flee into the mountains. Impossible with soldiers surrounding them. Some wanted to fight. With what? Their rosaries? A handful wanted to accept the terms, believing they could preserve some fragment of their community even under Ottoman control. But Sister Anna, standing in the chapel on the 3rd night with dawn approaching, said something that silenced the debate. "They don't want us to survive as we are. They want us to forget who we are. If we accept their terms, we do the forgetting ourselves. If we refuse, at least we die remembering." 43 women. 43 choices. In the end, 39 refused to submit. 4 younger sisters, barely out of adolescence, accepted conversion, weeping as they spoke the words the translator gave them. No one blamed them. How could they? Fear is not a sin when the alternative is hell on earth. The remaining 39 were marched out of the convent at dawn on the 4th day. They were allowed to bring nothing, no crosses, no books, no mementos of the lives they were leaving behind, just the clothes on their backs and the prayers in their throats. The journey to Constantinople took 11 days. No carts, no mercy, just their feet and the road and the casual cruelty of guards who saw them as cargo, not people. By the time they reached the capital, 4 had died, 2 from exhaustion, 1 from fever, 1 who simply sat down on the 5th day and refused to stand again, her heart giving out before her faith did. The 35 survivors were taken not to the palace, but to a holding facility near the docks, a warehouse that smelled of rotting fish and unwashed bodies. They were fed minimally and given water, and then the process began. One by one, they were called into a room where Ottoman officials sat with ledgers and interpreters. The offer was always the same: speak the Shahada, accept Islam, take a new name, and you will be placed in a position of honor in a respected household. Refuse, and you will be sold to whoever bids highest. Some historians argue this was pragmatism, not cruelty. The Ottomans needed workers, needed to integrate conquered populations, needed to demonstrate that conversion offered tangible benefits, but read the letters from Venetian merchants who witnessed these proceedings. Read the testimony of a Serbian monk who escaped similar treatment and wrote about it in a monastery in Wallachia. Read between the lines of the Ottoman records themselves. This wasn't about integration. This was about breaking people so thoroughly that they became examples, walking warnings to anyone else who thought resistance was possible. Sister Anna was the 16th woman called into that room. By then, she had heard the others return, some weeping, some silent, some wearing new clothes that didn't fit, answering to names they didn't recognize. 3 had refused and been dragged away to the slave markets. Their screams echoed through the warehouse for hours. And now it was her turn. The governor, a man named Hassan Bey, whose name appears in Ottoman judicial records from this period as a specialist in religious conversions, regarded her with something between curiosity and boredom. He had done this hundreds of times. But something about the way Sister Anna stood there, back straight, hands steady, made him pause. "You are educated," he said in Greek that was surprisingly fluent. "I can see it in your eyes. You understand what is happening here." She nodded. "Then you understand that your choice is simple. Speak the words, accept the truth of God's final revelation, and you will be treated with dignity. Continue in your error, and you will be sold to a man who will not care what you believe, only what you can do for him." Sister Anna looked him in the eye. "I have already given my life to God. You can take my body, my name, my freedom. You cannot take my soul." Hassan Bey sighed. He had heard this speech before, too. "Your soul is not my concern. Your compliance is." He gestured to the guards, and that's when Sister Anna did something none of the others had thought to do. She asked a question. "Before you send me away, I want to know, what happens to the women who convert? Do they really find honor? Or do they scrub floors in silence, forbidden to pray, forbidden to remember, until they die having served an empire that erased them?" The room went very quiet. Hassan Bey's expression shifted just for a moment, and Sister Anna saw something there. Not guilt, but recognition. He knew she knew the truth. "Some find contentment in their new lives," he said carefully. "Others adjust in time." "Adjust," Sister Anna repeated, "like a bird adjusts to a cage by forgetting it once had wings." Hassan Bey stood abruptly. "Take her to the market. She has made her choice." But as the guards moved forward, Sister Anna spoke again, not to the governor but to the scribe recording the proceedings. She spoke in Greek, loudly, clearly, every word etched with the force of a vow. "Record this. We did not submit. We did not forget. And when you search your archives centuries from now, wondering what happened to the women who refused your empire's mercy, remember that we chose to be remembered as we were, not as you wanted us to become." The scribe's pen hesitated. The governor waved his hand in irritation, and the guards hauled Sister Anna from the room. What happened next is documented in a letter discovered in 1997 in the Venetian State Archives, a merchant's account of the Constantinople slave market in August 1471. He describes a group of Christian women, still wearing the remnants of religious habits, being auctioned to the highest bidders. He notes that one of them, a woman in her 30s with a face like stone and eyes that burned, was purchased by a minor official for his household in Anatolia. The merchant adds a strange detail. As she was led away, she began to sing. A hymn in a language he didn't recognize, a melody that made the crowd fall silent. She sang it all the way through the market, her voice never wavering, until she disappeared into the streets of a city that was no longer hers. That was the last confirmed sighting of Sister Anna. Ottoman household records from the period are incomplete, and what survives rarely names servants. But there's a notation in a document from 1474, filed by the same official who purchased her. Female servant, former Greek religious, deceased. Cause, fever. Burial, unmarked, as per protocol for non-believers. She was 36 years old. Of the 35 women who reached Constantinople, 7 converted under duress. 13 were sold into servitude and vanished into the empire's vastness. 9 died within the first 2 years, disease, despair, or the slow attrition of lives broken by captivity. The remaining 6, the records simply stop. Whether they died, escaped, or were absorbed so completely into Ottoman society that their origins were erased, we will never know. But here's what survives. In 2003, researchers working in the Topkapi Palace archives found a collection of letters written by converted Christian women to their families, letters that were intercepted and never sent, preserved as intelligence for Ottoman officials tracking potential resistance. Among them was a letter from a woman calling herself Aishi, formerly Sister Maria of Holy Trinity. She writes in Greek so rusty it's clear she hadn't used the language in years. She describes her life in an Ottoman household, not cruel but empty, a life lived in the hollow space where her faith used to be. And then, at the end, she writes, "I think of Anna every day. They tell me she died singing. I think of that, and I wonder if I made the wrong choice. They gave me life, but she kept her soul. Which of us truly survived?" That letter was never sent, but it survived, tucked in an archive folder, waiting 5 centuries for someone to find it and realize what it meant. Even the women who submitted, who accepted the empire's terms, who wore new names like ill-fitting clothes, even they remembered. Even they knew the cost. The convent of Holy Trinity was converted into a barracks 3 months after the women were taken. The chapel became a storage room. The gardens where they grew herbs were paved over. By 1480, no trace remained that it had ever been a place of prayer. The Ottoman cadastral survey from that year lists it simply as military facility, former Christian structure. But in 1923, after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, Greek refugees returning to reclaim ancestral lands found something strange in the ruins of that barracks. Buried beneath rubble, hidden in what had once been the chapel's foundation, they discovered a wooden box sealed with wax. Inside were 43 small silver crosses on chains, one for each woman who had lived there. Someone, on the night before the soldiers came, had buried them. A message in silver, waiting in darkness for 500 years. We were here. We believed. You cannot erase us completely. Those crosses are in a museum in Thessaloniki now, displayed behind glass with a small plaque explaining their origin. Tourists walk past them every day, mostly unseeing, on their way to more dramatic exhibits. But if you stop, if you really look at those 43 tiny crosses catching the light, you see what Sister Anna saw in that room in Constantinople. That faith isn't about what you get to keep. It's about what you refuse to give away, even when they take everything else. The Ottoman Empire lasted another 400 years after Sister Anna died. It conquered, administered, and reshaped the world. But empires are made of stone and steel and the will of men, and eventually all of that crumbles. What doesn't crumble? A box of crosses buried in hope, a hymn sung in defiance through a marketplace, a letter written in secret, never sent, but somehow surviving, and a question posed to a scribe in a language meant to outlast the empire that tried to silence it. Will you remember us as we were, or as you wanted us to be? 5 centuries later, we're still answering.